Hi and welcome to Life is Magic AF. I'm Leonie and each week I'll be reading out your stories and experiences of all things weird, spooky, unexplained, miraculous or magical. I'll also be talking about anything related to those stories and giving you tips on how you can embrace your magic. If you'd like your story featured on the show, please email me at magicafstories@gmail.com. Today, we are talking about real experiences and scary fairies. So, this first story happened to a friend of mine who wanted to remain anonymous but wanted to share his story. He says he was walking home late one evening from a friend's house, and he says it was nearly 1 a.m. when he left his friends. He had to cross a park to get home as he was still living at home with his family at that time. He had taken this route many times before. As he was cutting across the parkland before going to his house, something happened that even to this day he can't explain. He stresses here that he hadn't been smoking, hadn't been drinking or anything like that, and he says he remembers looking at his watch and remembers the time that it had just gone 1 a.m. He said that all of a sudden there was a really bright flash of light all around him, and then the next thing he remembered is looking at his watch again. He was still in the same part of the park where he was first, still in the same clearing of trees. He said that nothing had changed around him, but when he looked at his watch again, it was gone 4 a.m. He wasn't injured. He said he hadn't been drinking, hadn't fallen over, was still in the same clothes, nothing was missing, so he hadn't been robbed. He says it was just like he blinked and lost 3 hours of his life, and to this day he doesn't know what happened to him. We've spoken about it a few times and we don't know whether it was ETs, we don't know what it was, no other explanations. He doesn't know what it was. I wonder if anything like that has ever happened to you, or if you know of something similar having happened to someone you know. So weird. Like, how weird is that? Like, how can someone just lose hours of their life like that with no explanation? Like, how can that happen? I know we can daydream or we can fall asleep or nap and then, jump awake and find out that it's been half an hour or an hour or something. But 3 hours and no notable change around you. You're in the same place. So weird. I would really love to know what you think it could have been. What is your theory on that one? So this next story was shared with me by a lady called Michelle. And Michelle says, so I was away in Wales for a weekend with my husband, and we hadn't planned where we were going to stay. We just thought we would rock up at whichever kind of hotel or pub we could find and just spend the night. We managed to find a lovely little pub that was obviously quite old, but it looked like it had been recently refurbished, so we went to the pub and booked one of the couple of rooms that they had left in what looked like had been converted stables or something like that. The man behind the bar said we'd missed lunchtime and we wouldn't be able to have dinner till a little bit later that evening, when the kitchen opened again for the dinner shift. So me and my husband decided to go for a walk. There was lots of lovely farmland around and places to explore and go walking around, so that's what we decided to do to kill some time. We got our bags from the car, we took them and put them into the room, and we went for a walk. There was a field quite close to the pub, so we decided to go walking through the field, and it looked like there was a gate or something to a certain part of the field along the side of it, but it looked like the grass there was a bit more overgrown, and the trees were a bit wilder somehow. One of the trees at the end had things tied in the branches, and I wanted to see what they were. The gate to that part had been closed, but we opened it and we walked through to go and have a closer look at what the things were on the tree. The tree was quite small and covered in lots of little bits of faded material or ribbons, all tied to the branches of the tree. I reached out to touch one and to see what it was made of, but I didn't untie anything. We tried to leave everything exactly as we had found it, but we must have disturbed something because the atmosphere changed as soon as we went into this other part of the field. My husband wasn't aware of it, but I was aware that the feeling had changed. The atmosphere was different somehow. I thought it was a bit creepy and said so, but my husband just said, "Oh, you're being silly." And so I said, "Oh, no, can we come back out of this part of the field now, please?" He looked at the time and agreed we could go back to the pub as the kitchens would be opening back up soon. We go and get some dinner back at the pub, which was really lovely, and then later that evening, after a couple of drinks, we turned in for the night. Now the room we were staying in had a skylight in the middle of the room, and all around the room there were wooden panels of how it had been decorated. I felt fine going to sleep. My husband was fine going to sleep. We'd spent the day walking around and exploring, and with all that fresh air, it didn't take us long to nod off. But I woke up in the middle of the night because I heard what can only be described as a scratching, scraping sound coming from the walls. Sometimes I can be a light sleeper, and sometimes I find it difficult to settle properly, especially if I'm sleeping in a new place, and so I just listened to it for a bit. And I thought it's probably just the building settling down and everything creaking back into place, because it was an old building. It had been converted, but it was clearly an old building. So I tried to just ignore it and just go back to sleep, but I couldn't ignore it, and I could hear, the more I listened to the scratching and scraping noise, I was trying to pinpoint where I thought it was coming from or what it could be. What was making that noise, and it sounded to me like long nails or something like that being dragged slowly, but from inside the walls, so between the walls and the panelling. And I'm thinking to myself, is this mice or rats? Like, what could be making that noise? It sounded like something was trying to scratch away into the actual room itself. So I tried to wake my husband up at this point, and he didn't even stir. He's a really heavy sleeper in comparison to me, and he just kind of grunted at me and then turned over. He didn't wake up. Then the noises seemed to move up to the roof and up into the ceiling of the room. The door was locked. I know that because we made sure of that before we went to sleep. And something moved over the skylight, but it was too quick for me to really make anything out. And then there was the noise again, almost this time like a scrabbling noise, like something was trying to get in at the skylight, trying to lift up the edges and open it. Now the skylight could open. We had opened it earlier that evening, but it was shut properly now, and I couldn't see exactly what it was that was trying to get in. But something was trying to get in, and I was feeling really frightened at this point. I really wanted to see what it was, but I didn't want to go and look. I wished my husband would wake up, but he wouldn't. I tried again to wake him, and he just wouldn't wake up. There was more of this scratching, scraping kind of dragging noise, and the more I listened, the more there was actually a slight metallic sound to it. I still couldn't work out what it was, no idea what it could be. I was really frightened at this point, and then it just stopped. There were no other noises, which was really frightening. And I laid there for a while, just waiting and trying to hear if there was anything. Wondering, was it going to come back? Nothing. It didn't come back. I must have laid awake for a good 2 hours or so. But the noise never came back again, and eventually I must have fallen asleep, because when I woke back up, it was morning. I said to my husband everything that had happened and said to him, "I can't believe you didn't hear anything. How could you sleep through that? It was really loud." I said it sounded like something was trying to get in. So he got up, he got dressed and had a look round, but he couldn't see anything outside the building. Obviously we couldn't get up onto the top of the building, so we couldn't see round the skylight or anything like that. We went back to the bar to get some breakfast, and I said to the girl behind the bar if anybody had ever mentioned they'd had strange experiences, and then shared what had happened, what I'd heard in the night. She said she'd worked there for a while, and the only thing that they had heard was a local legend of a fairy or spirit that was said to live over in that far part of the field where me and my husband had gone exploring the day before, but she said she didn't know too much about it. I think she might have known more than she let on, but wasn't very forthcoming with information. When I got home, I looked up about what it could have been, and I was absolutely horrified to find that the closest thing seemed to be a type of fairy or spirit called a red cap that basically either has long claws or carries a long blade of some description, and it basically tries to get into where people are sleeping, and it kills them if they've displeased it in some way. And the reason the cap is red is because he dips his cap in the victim's blood, and so that's why he has a red cap. So that is my story. It is the truth of what happened to us that night. I know it sounds far-fetched, but that is literally what happened. I haven't been back to that pub, and I wouldn't go back either. I would just say, if you are out in woodland or fields and you aren't familiar with the area, try not to disturb anything. Oh, that's the end of that story. I am not sure what's more frightening, not knowing what it was or thinking of what if it was a red cap. I wonder if it had something to do with the tree that had ribbons on. But she said she didn't disturb anything. Maybe that spirit or fairy or whatever it was just did not want them in that part of the field. Obviously it had been fenced off. Maybe there should have been a sign put on, "Please keep out," or I don't know, but creepy AF. Maybe this episode should have been called Creepy AF. I don't know. So I seem to remember that trees and bushes in folklore are places to appease or revere nature spirits or land wights. So wights is spelled Wights, which are the spirits of particular places. According to the old stories, nature spirits and fairies could be so beautiful that mortals were unable to resist them, or so ugly that people could die from fear. There were light fairies who were mostly good and dark fairies who were mostly evil, though this is a generalisation. If you do want to look more into fairies, or maybe you know this already if you are obsessed with fairies, the light fairies are generally from the Seelie court, which is spelled Seelie and then court, and the dark fairies tend to be from the Unseelie court, Unseelie court. So children also used to be cautioned to stay away from fairy mounds. These are strange solitary hills in odd places, such as the middle of a field. These round grassy knolls are believed to be entrances to the underground fairy realm. Venture too close and you could disappear, never to be seen again. It was especially dangerous if you were a beautiful woman or a handsome man. You might be spirited away by fairies looking for a mortal mate. And it's really interesting actually. So although in our kind of modern world we might sort of dismiss this or put it down to superstition or just kind of old wives' tales, but still in many rural communities, both in this country and also in Ireland, places like that, they will not farm over a a fairy mound. So like if there's an unnatural hill or like a ring of trees or something in the middle of the farmer's land, the farmer will go around those places. They won't disturb it. So I think there's also stories of people who have disturbed those mounds or those special places, and then they've had all sorts of terrible luck befall them. So yeah, something to look into anyway. There is often local law as well that urges people to steer clear of certain trees late at night, especially hazel, thorn, alder and oak, because they're favourite haunts for fairies. You could find yourself pinched and hit as you walk by, or tangled in the branches until morning. Farmers knew better than to enter a mill at night. This was said to be the time that fairies brought their grain to be ground. Interrupting fairies when they are working could earn you a failed crop or other curse. You needed to watch where you were walking, because a strange tuft of grass or stray bit of sod could trigger a spell if stepped on. Your path through the woods could suddenly disappear. If you were crossing an open field, you might keep veering in the wrong direction or cross it only to arrive on the same side you started from. It's called being pixie-led, and it could happen in broad daylight. Oh, scary. I think that could be a link between these two stories. So my friend who lost 3 hours with no explanation, maybe he was pixie-led. And then Michelle's story with the tree and the potential redcap encounter. It just makes you think that maybe there's more to these stories than just being kind of fiction or lore and legend after all. What do you think? I am really curious to hear your thoughts on these stories. Anyway, that's all for today. So thank you for listening. Please join us next time for more shared experiences. If you want to share your story, and I'd love to hear it, please send in your stories to magicafstories@gmail.com. It's all just further proof that this life really is magic AF. Thanks, bye.